If you have been around the game long enough, you already know the heavy, dark cloud that hangs over the 1986 NBA draft. It is widely remembered as the most cursed class in basketball history, a draft completely overshadowed by tragedy and lost potential. That summer, the atmosphere of the entire league shifted overnight, leaving fans and front offices reeling. But before the heartbreaking realities of that era set in, there was a moment of pure, unbridled hope for the Golden State Warriors. They thought they had just found their franchise savior, a man who could carry them into the next decade. According to official NBA draft archives, on June 17, 1986, the Warriors selected Chris Washburn with the third overall pick in the first round. And it was easy to see why they made that massive investment. Historical scouting reports from that spring measured Washburn at a towering 6'11" and a chiseled 235 pounds. He was not just big, he possessed a revolutionary mix of sheer size, soft touch, and terrifying speed. Scouts looked at him and saw the prototype of the modern center, an athlete who looked like he had been built in a laboratory to dominate the paint. Reporters noted at the time that Golden State's front office was absolutely euphoric, genuinely believing they had secured a cornerstone capable of turning the league upside down. But why did a young man built like a Greek god, drafted ahead of future Hall of Famers, start tumbling out of the league almost immediately after shaking the commissioner's hand? Who was truly vetting these top prospects behind closed doors? The sheer scale of the expectations placed on his massive shoulders was historic, but the cracks in the foundation were already there for anyone willing to look. To truly understand how Golden State was completely blinded by his physical talent, we have to look away from the draft stage and examine the massive red flag that was sitting in his college dorm room just 2 years earlier. Before he ever put on a Warriors uniform, Chris Washburn was the pride and joy of North Carolina State University, playing under the legendary coach Jim Valvano. The college game was heavily focused on dominant big men, and Washburn fit the bill perfectly. When he was on the floor, he was electric, but the tension between Valvano's championship ambitions and his star player's complete lack of discipline was a badly kept secret. His undeniable on-court production caused a lot of powerful people to look the other way when his off-court behavior began crossing serious lines. Court records showed that in December of 1984, Washburn was arrested for stealing a stereo, an incident that eventually led to him serving 46 hours in jail and receiving a 5-year suspended sentence. This was not a minor misunderstanding. It was a documented brush with the law that brought police right to his doorstep. How could a program with national title hopes and eventually an NBA front office sweep a documented criminal record under the rug? Did the overwhelming pressure to win cause scouts to willfully ignore the truth about his character? Instead of treating the arrest as a massive wake-up call, the basketball machine just kept moving. Washburn came back for his sophomore campaign and put on an absolute clinic. According to college basketball archives, during the 1985 to 1986 season, he averaged an incredibly impressive 17.6 points and 6.7 rebounds per game. He was dominating the Atlantic Coast Conference, completely masking his growing personal instability and his shift toward destructive habits. He was given a free pass because of his jump hook and his rebounding, highlighting a system that routinely enabled its most gifted stars. Despite the troubling rap sheet and the loud whispers circulating through the professional scouting community, millions of dollars were about to hit his bank account in California. Arriving in Oakland was a massive culture shock. The structured, closely monitored world of college basketball was gone, replaced by the glittering high-speed reality of the NBA in the mid-'80s. Washburn went from a college campus to sudden wealth, handed a tremendous amount of money with zero structural supervision. According to major sports media reports at the time, in September of 1986, Washburn signed a multi-year, guaranteed rookie contract worth over $1 million. To a deeply troubled 21-year-old, that kind of windfall was not just a reward, it was an enabler. Almost immediately, the coaching staff realized they had a severe problem on their hands. Washburn arrived at his first professional training camp visibly out of shape and mentally disengaged. There were frustrating flashes of brilliance during practices, quick reminders of why he was drafted third overall. But those moments were entirely overshadowed by a baffling, chronic lack of effort. When it came time to actually play, the results were incredibly concerning. According to historical game logs, on October 31, 1986, Washburn made his official NBA debut against the Denver Nuggets, but he only managed to stay on the floor for 13 mostly ineffective minutes. Television coverage at the time focused on his sluggish movement, with broadcasters openly questioning his conditioning early in the season. But what happens when a young man with a known history of bad decisions is suddenly handed a $1 million check in a major city, completely left to his own devices? The narrative quickly shifted from poor conditioning to something far more dangerous. He started missing practices and shoot-arounds. The team scrambled to control the narrative, desperately trying to protect their investment by covering up his frequent absences as mysterious illnesses and minor physical setbacks. But the excuses could only last so long. Midway through his rookie season, the dark, undeniable truth about his destructive dependency demanded a harsh public reckoning. The Golden State Warriors knew they were losing control of their prized rookie, but instead of coming clean, they tried to buy time. Basketball teams in the 1980s handled off-court crises very differently than they do today. There was no robust league-wide support system, and front offices usually tried to handle things internally to protect their massive financial investments. As Washburn began vanishing from the active lineup, the Warriors' public relations team scrambled to float a story. They formally claimed their young center was dealing with a severe kidney infection, hoping the excuse would give him time to pull himself together behind closed doors. Reporters noted at the time that the story just did not add up, especially for a 21-year-old world-class athlete whose physical decline was becoming visibly obvious on the rare occasions he did suit up. But why did the narrative stop being just about basketball exactly in early 1987? What was happening off the court that forced the franchise to suddenly abandon their fabricated cover story? The truth was that Washburn was struggling with a deeply destructive dependency, and his condition had deteriorated far past the point of a simple media spin. According to press conference transcripts and major sports media coverage, on January 28, 1987, Washburn was formally admitted to a substance abuse clinic in Van Nuys, California. The truth was finally out, and the immediate basketball fallout was severe. The stint in rehabilitation essentially erased his rookie campaign. Instead of contending for Rookie of the Year honors, he became a ghost on the roster. According to official NBA statistics, Washburn played only 35 games during the 1986 to 1987 season, averaging a dismal 3.8 points per game. The Warriors quickly realized they could not save him, setting the stage for a desperate mid-season trade that felt less like a basketball decision and more like a permanent eviction. Giving up on a third overall pick after just 1 year is one of the hardest things a general manager can do, but Golden State was more than ready to cut their losses. By his second year, the writing was clearly on the wall in Oakland. The team had tried patience, they had tried rehabilitation, and they had tried covering for his absences. Nothing worked. According to Basketball Archives, Washburn played a grand total of just 8 games for Golden State in the 1987 to 1988 season, before the front office finally pulled the plug. According to official league transaction wires, on December 14, 1987, the Warriors officially traded him to the Atlanta Hawks in exchange for Ken Barlow. Television coverage at the time focused heavily on the sheer lopsided nature of the deal. Why would a rising Eastern Conference powerhouse take a chance on a player Golden State could not wait to get rid of? Did the Hawks' front office truly believe their strong veteran locker room could fix him? Or were they simply blinded by his massive 6'11" frame? Atlanta was a highly competitive team with serious playoff ambitions. Led by Dominique Wilkins, they desperately needed size to combat the bruising big men of the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons. Moving closer to his Southern roots and joining a strict winning culture was supposed to be the ultimate wake-up call for the troubled center. For a brief moment, there was a glimmer of false hope that a change of scenery would save his career. But while the Hawks were physically battling the Celtics and Pistons for Eastern Conference supremacy, Washburn was quietly losing a much darker personal battle off the court, setting him up for a direct collision with the league's strict new testing policies. The fresh start in Atlanta quickly revealed itself to be a complete mirage. You can change a player's jersey and move him across the country, but you cannot outrun the habits you pack in your own suitcase. The Hawks were a well-oiled machine, and head coach Mike Fratello did not have the time or the patience to babysit a project who was not putting in the necessary daily work. As a result, Washburn found himself permanently glued to the bench. According to archive season statistics, during that 1987 to 1988 season, Washburn played only 29 games for Atlanta, averaging an absolutely abysmal 2 points per game. His minutes completely evaporated. Meanwhile, the professional landscape around him was changing. Commissioner David Stern was actively working to clean up the NBA's public image, instituting aggressive, heavily enforced anti-drug policies. The era of front offices quietly hiding their players' indiscretions was rapidly coming to an end. According to major sports media reports from that spring, Washburn failed a second league-mandated test for banned substances. The news sent shockwaves through the Hawks organization and the league office. Who was slipping through the cracks of the NBA's supposedly ironclad testing protocol? And how long did Washburn think he could hide his dependency in plain sight? This was not just a minor team infraction. It was a devastating blow that pushed him to the absolute brink of permanent league expulsion. His brief, disastrous run was practically over before it even started. According to historical NBA records, Chris Washburn's entire professional career would ultimately span a pitiful 72 games over 2 seasons. He was summoned and given one final, strictly documented warning by the league. But his personal crisis was already proving stronger than his fear of losing his guaranteed NBA checks forever. The NBA in the late 80s was actively shifting its culture. The league office under Commissioner David Stern was working aggressively to clean up professional basketball's public image, which meant the old era of sweeping player indiscretions under the rug was rapidly coming to an end. The rules were clear, the testing was becoming rigorous, and the margin for error had completely vanished. Washburn, however, was already caught in a downward spiral of destructive dependency, unable to align his personal habits with the stringent new demands of his profession. According to major sports media reports from that period, the situation reached a breaking point when Washburn failed a third mandatory test for banned substances. But what happens the morning after a young athlete realizes his only marketable skill is now legally prohibited at the highest level of competition? How fast does a professional safety net collapse when the front office officially turns its back? The league's response was swift and completely unforgiving, stripping away his uniform, his platform, and his future in one absolute ruling. According to league memos and widespread press coverage, on June 29, 1989, the NBA officially announced a lifetime ban for Chris Washburn. According to biographical records, he was only 24 years old at the time the ruling came down. A man who was supposed to be entering his physical prime was instead permanently exiled from the game he was drafted to dominate. Stripped of his NBA shield and completely cut off from his guaranteed rookie millions, he was forced to take his fading talents to the gritty, unforgiving gyms of the minor leagues just to survive. When the NBA shuts its doors on you, the glamour of professional basketball disappears overnight. There are no chartered flights, no massive endorsement deals, and no sold-out arenas. Instead, there are long bus rides, half-empty high school gymnasiums, and a desperate scramble to secure short-term paychecks. Washburn tried to keep his career alive, traveling across the country and overseas in search of anyone willing to pay for his towering 6'11" frame. According to CBA archived rosters in 1990, Washburn briefly surfaced playing for the Tulsa Fastbreakers in the Continental Basketball Association. It was a massive step down from the bright lights of Golden State and Atlanta, but it was a paycheck. However, reporters noted at the time that his stays in these minor and international leagues were remarkably brief, rarely lasting more than a few weeks or months. Who was still willing to sign a globally disgraced player? And why did these minor league lifelines continually snap almost as soon as they were extended? The reality was that his reputation preceded him everywhere he went, making long-term contracts absolutely impossible to secure. Teams were willing to take a quick flyer on his physical size, but his declining athleticism and lingering personal struggles quickly made him a liability. According to international basketball databases, he reportedly signed short-lived contracts in Argentina and the United States Basketball League during the early 1990s, but nothing ever stuck. His opportunities slowly dried up, and soon, even the minor league checks stopped clearing entirely, leaving him stranded in Texas with nothing left to sell but the clothes on his back. There is a terrifying speed at which an elite athlete can become a complete ghost to the public. As the 1990s progressed, Washburn dropped entirely out of the basketball narrative and entered a grueling, sheer human survival story. The million-dollar contracts and the roar of the crowds were entirely gone, replaced by the grim reality of life on the streets. By his own account, his fortune had been completely devoured by his dependency and a total lack of financial management, leaving him entirely unhoused. According to his own interviews given years later, throughout the mid to late 1990s, Washburn lived in abandoned buildings and rough neighborhoods in Houston, Texas. In later television reports, he said something close to this. He would intentionally hunch over and pull his coat over his head while scavenging for meals in trash cans, desperate to hide his face so nobody would recognize the former lottery pick. How does a man who shook the commissioner's hand and secured a massive guaranteed fortune just a few years earlier end up fighting for scraps in an alleyway, completely invisible to the world? The physical toll of this severe personal crisis was staggering. According to public material and his own reflections on that dark period, his health deteriorated so severely that his weight plummeted drastically from his commanding 235-pound NBA playing weight. He had lost his career, his wealth, and his physical strength, existing completely off the grid while the basketball world moved on without him. It would take a harrowing sequence of events at the turn of the century to finally wake him up from a decade-long nightmare. After nearly a decade lost in the shadows, existing day to day in the most desperate conditions imaginable, something finally had to give. When you are entirely disconnected from your past life, the climb back to reality does not happen overnight. It is not a movie montage. It is a grueling, quiet, and deeply personal fight. For Chris Washburn, the glamorous, high-priced clinics mandated by the NBA back in the 1980s had failed to break through to him because he was not yet ready to let go of his old identity. It took hitting the absolute bottom of the concrete pavement to trigger a true desire for mere survival. In his own personal interviews years later, he said something close to this. He finally looked at his surroundings and realized that if he did not walk away right then, he would never leave those streets at all. Why did this specific realization take hold when all the professional interventions failed? What changed in his mind when the cameras, the agents, and the enablers were completely gone? The answer was simple. There was no one left to perform for and no money left to cushion the fall. According to his own accounts, in December of the year 2000, Washburn finally committed to what would become his lasting, successful stint in a rehabilitation program. He stepped away from the sensationalism of his professional downfall and did the heavy, unglamorous lifting of recovery. To ensure the change was permanent, he knew he could not stay in Texas. According to local press and public records, after the year 2000, he relocated back to his home state of North Carolina, putting a massive physical distance between himself and his former environment. Now clean and sober, he had to face a world that only remembered him as a million-dollar punchline, starting from absolute scratch and trying to earn a standard hourly wage. Reintegrating into everyday society is an incredibly steep mountain to climb, especially when a quick internet search instantly labels you the biggest failure in basketball history. How hard is it to apply for a bank loan or rent an apartment when your name is tied to a lifetime ban and a squandered fortune? But Washburn did not hide from his past. Instead of making excuses or blaming the league, he started taking ordinary jobs, quietly rebuilding his life far away from the professional sports spotlight. He proved that there is a long, meaningful life to be lived even after you have been publicly branded a bust. Reporters noted at the time that he eventually began stepping back into the public eye, not to reclaim glory, but to tell the unfiltered truth. What happens when the ultimate cautionary tale decides to speak directly to the next generation? According to sports media features from the mid-2010s, Washburn regularly participated in interviews explicitly warning youth about the dangers of dependency and the fleeting nature of wealth. He used his own severe personal crisis as a living blueprint of what to avoid, shifting his public image from a tragic punchline to a respected, grounded survivor. He also pushed forward with his own entrepreneurial goals, determined to build something tangible with his own two hands. According to local press coverage and television reports, in 2012, Washburn opened a fried chicken business in Hickory, North Carolina, reportedly using a standard home mortgage to fund the venture. He was no longer trading on his 6'11" frame or his draft status. He was trading on hard work and daily consistency. But his greatest chance at true redemption would not come from a business venture or an interview. It would come from watching his own blood step onto an NBA court and sign a professional contract. The Washburn name carried a heavy, complicated burden in basketball circles. When your father is known as a legendary cautionary tale, every scout and coach looks at you through a microscope. But Chris Washburn's sons navigated that intense pressure by taking an entirely different approach to the game. They did not rely on overwhelming physical advantages or natural hype. Instead, they forged a path built purely on defensive grit, discipline, and the kind of unglamorous hard work their father struggled to find in his own youth. According to Basketball Archives, his son, Julian Washburn, went completely undrafted in 2015. This stood in massive, stark contrast to his father's celebrated selection as the third overall pick 3 decades earlier. In interviews, Chris said something close to this. He was actually grateful his sons had to grind for their opportunities, using his own massive failures as the ultimate guide on how to survive the business of basketball. How did a father who lost everything feel watching his son ride minor league buses, knowing exactly how unforgiving that road could be? The ultimate validation of this long, painful family journey finally arrived on the biggest stage. According to official NBA transaction reports, on January 15, 2019, Julian Washburn officially signed a 2-way contract with the Memphis Grizzlies. Chris Washburn was able to sit in an NBA arena and watch his jersey name worn by a young man who had truly earned every single minute of floor time. Chris Washburn's story began with an unprecedented rise and a catastrophic fall, but it ends with resilience. He is no longer defined just by those 72 games or the millions he lost, but by the quiet, dignified way he reclaimed his stolen life.